be like? What will happen? Today's routine from the perspective of the court, but it is unprecedented considering who the defendant is in this case. So what should we expect when the former president is arraigned? Let's get some insight. We welcome in Mitchell Epner. He's a former federal prosecutor, a member of the firm Rottenberg, Lippman, Rich PC. He's also a friend of the show. He also works in New York City. So, Mr. Epner, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be promoted to friend of the show. And I'm actually also a 3-block away neighbor of the former president.
You live 3 blocks away. So let me ask you this personal question then. Is it chaos outside of your building?
No. As you said before, this is par for the course in New York. We dealt with the Secret Service blocking off 56th Street between 5th and Madison during his entire time in office. New York takes this one in stride.
So prior to 2016, though, I don't know if you lived there then, but I mean, is it different from that?
So people in Midtown Manhattan were very annoyed during the Trump presidency that 56th Street no longer went from one side of the island to the other. And that's true again, and it will create some degree of additional traffic. But on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as disruption in New York so far, this is like a 2 or a 3.
Does he get a presidential motorcade to go from Trump Tower to the courthouse? Like, how long is that trip? And will the public actually have a chance to see him during that trip, when he walks into the courthouse, et cetera? When will we actually see him? How long is it going to take him to get from Trump Tower to the courthouse?
So it's roughly a 3-mile drive. My guess, and this is a pure guess, is that he would take the FDR Drive, which is the highway that runs along the East River, that dumps you off right next to the courthouse. So unless somebody is on 56th Street right by Trump Tower, you're not going to have an opportunity to see him because you can't stand along the highway. And
I was listening to a podcast yesterday. They said he is thinking about things like, will I smile when I walk through the hallway in the bowels of the New York courthouse? And so will there be a glimpse of him at some point within the courthouse?
Well, there certainly will be once he's in the courtroom, because the judge has allowed a pool of 5 photographers into the jury box before the proceedings start. So everybody is going to see those images. And I think it's very likely that the former president has thought a lot about what image he wants to project for those photographers.
So those photographers do have to leave once the proceedings begin. Do I have that right?
Correct.
And so the judge has ruled that. I understand, especially, after the O.J. Simpson situation, you just saw a judge completely lose control of a situation there. No judge wants to do that again. And I can understand why a judge would say no cameras. But at the same time, this has never happened in American history. It's kind of bad to not have that for posterity. What do you think, as someone who has been a federal prosecutor where there are never cameras allowed in the federal courthouse? So what do you think of the judge's decision here?
So the judge has the discretion with something like this, an arraignment where no testimony is going to be taken. By law in New York state courts, for the trial itself where testimony will be taken, the judge cannot allow cameras in the courtroom. So I think that he's reached a fair compromise with regard to today's proceedings. But nobody should expect to be able to follow this trial the way they trialed the O.J. Simpson trial or the Murdoch trial or any of the other high-profile televised trials.
So how long will this all take?
An usual arraignment is over in 3 to 5 minutes. There is normally a waiving of the reading of the indictment, the entry of a plea of not guilty, and the assignment of bail, and perhaps some scheduling, and that's it.
So even if there's a waiving of the arraignment, though, it will then become unsealed. We will be able to see what these charges are, right?
Well, so they're not going to force the prosecutor to read out loud the counts, but as soon as the arraignment begins, my expectation is that the Public Affairs Office of the DA will make public a copy of the indictment, which everybody in the press will have, and it'll be around the world very quickly.
And I know it's still sealed, so we're asking you to kind of read the tea leaves here, but what do you expect to see when you do see that indictment?
So clearly there's going to be a charge or charges for false entries in the Trump Organization books and records with regard to how they accounted for the payments to Stormy Daniels and the repayments to Michael Cohen. The thing that I'm looking for most intently is what is the underlying crime that the DA is contending was being advanced or covered up by those payments. Because the false entries by themselves are just a misdemeanor. It's the cover-up or the advancing of another crime that converts it into a felony. Lots of people have been speculating that that's going to be a campaign finance charge. I have some concerns and some doubts about that because I think that the campaign finance laws, as the state laws interact with the federal laws, would make that underlying case very difficult.
Well, and I want to ask you about that, too, because I have read a lot that this is an iffy case because you have a local DA that's basically prosecuting a state charge, but it's a federal campaign, and it hinges on the word of a convicted and admitted perjurer. So do you think this case begins on shaky ground?
Well, I don't know because I'm not confident that it's going to be the campaign finance predicate crime. There are a friend and colleague of mine, Diana Florence, who's a former ADA, has publicly speculated that the underlying crime might be tax offenses. And if it were tax offenses, that would be an easier case to make because you would take out some of the uncertainty that you just discussed. With regard to Michael Cohen, I do not think that any reasonable prosecutor would trust that a jury would believe Michael Cohen unless every word that he was saying was corroborated by contemporaneous documents. I do not think that he will be trusted by a prosecutor to be credible on his own. He's a storyteller, but he's not somebody who can be a trusted storyteller.
Well, my final question to you, Mr. Heppner, because we do have to let you go here, is we've been talking, you and I have talked about Sam Bankman-Fried and bail restrictions and house arrest and not being able to use the internet. The judge here, President Trump, former President Trump, has already planned to be in West Palm Beach to make a statement, probably on national television later tonight. Are we expecting some sort of bail restrictions in a case like this?
I would be shocked if there were bail restrictions of any significance on Donald Trump. First of all, this is state, not federal, as Sam Bankman-Fried is. And in the state court, we've had major bail reforms. So virtually all nonviolent offenders get released on their recognizance. And second, this is the world's most famous man at this point. I don't see any world where the judge is going to say you have to be restricted to your home or you have to be restricted from using the internet. This is going to be a process, and during the process, I expect that Donald Trump will continue to speak his mind.
But what about posting about the case? What about social media? What about directing anything toward Alvin Bragg, the DA in this case? Do you think a judge might say, you can go about and live your life, you can campaign for president, but you can't talk about this case, and you specifically can't talk about Alvin Bragg? Those sorts of gag orders have been entered sometimes, but I think they have real First Amendment concerns here. I could see the judge easily saying you can't issue anything that would be seen as a physical threat to Alvin Bragg. For example, the photograph that he reposted of him carrying a baseball bat next to a picture of Alvin Bragg, I think the judge might weigh in on something like that. But the judge is in a tricky place because any restriction that he places on former President Trump, he has to be prepared to back up with a sanction. And sanctioning the former president is very difficult in a world where he is the leading candidate for Republican nomination for president in 2024. And the judge is not going to, I don't think the judge is likely to want to be in a position where he gets into a stare down with the former president. Because I don't think he wants to be in a position where he has to say, you go to jail for being in contempt of my orders. Juan Merchan is the judge in this one, and he has a complicated legal process ahead of him. Mitchell Heppner, thank you very much for helping us sort through some of that complication this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, still ahead on Early Morning, demanding